Hello and welcome back to We Talk Boxing. And today I will be discussing the fight which took place last night between Andy Ruiz Jr. and Luis Ortiz. Now, this was a title eliminator where the winner would face off against the winner of obviously Robert Helenius versus Deontay Wilder, which again, whoever wins that matchup will fight the winner of this bout and potentially will fight the WBC champion in the near future. Now, before I continue with my post-fight analysis, please subscribe, like, comment, and share for future boxing-related content. Now, my initial thoughts, after seeing this fight, that honestly, I thought it would have been a little bit more exciting. Do you know what I mean? Considering both of their boxing styles, I honestly thought, this would have potentially been a toe-to-toe battle between both guys, where both guys would have potentially maybe even been trading some big shots against each other. But it was quite the opposite. Do you know what I mean? But yeah, it's just one of them, really. Andy Ruiz, however, he, won on a 12-round unanimous decision. Obviously, the judges, saw him, edging the fight. Two judges had him winning 14 to 111. And the other judge, had it a little bit closer. Do you know what I mean? 113 to 112, which was ironic really because considering there was three knockdowns in the fight and all three came from Andy Ruiz Jr. Do you know what I mean? It goes to show that he wasn't the most dominant of fighter in that ring, and Ortiz actually came back and won quite a lot of those rounds, and made the fight a lot closer than what it should have been. Do you know what I mean? Now, comparing both of their records, do you know what I mean? Obviously, Ruiz now, takes his record, to 35 wins, obviously, with 2 losses to his name. Do you know what I mean? So, again, he's going to hopefully progress to potentially, and challenge, obviously, the winner of, obviously, Helenius and Wilder in the near future. And, depending on what happens in that fight, he could potentially, if he wins, obviously, he could go forward and maybe fight Tyson Fury if Tyson Fury is still around. Or if Tyson Fury is not around and he beats the winner of those two, then he might just be given the title. It might just be turned into a title fight instead. Do you know what I mean? But Ortiz, on the other hand, you know what I mean? Now that he's lost, you know what I mean? This is his third loss, in 36 fights. He's won 33 of his previous fights as well. So the writing's on the wall for him. Do you know what I mean? It was a good display from, Ortiz at times. Do you know what I mean? But, I think his age was showing quite a lot in that fight, really. And, a younger Ortiz potentially would have caused Ruiz a lot more trouble. Do you know what I mean? But, the earlier rounds of the fight, the first round, you could pretty much say that both guys were just getting warmed and seeing what each other had. And obviously, it got a little bit more exciting, in round 2, where we saw 2 of 3 knockdowns, in that round where Ruiz caught, he caught Ortiz coming in, both guys were in the middle, trading shots against each other. And, at the time of, just before the knockdown, Ortiz landed simultaneously whilst Ruiz landed, but it was Ruiz shot which carried the more power and it dropped Ortiz. Do you know what I mean? He had I think it was an 8 count at the time, and then he managed to get back to his feet before the referee said he was fine to continue. But literally within 30 seconds, give or take, he then went down for a second time. The second knockdown was kind of a flash knockdown. Some said it wasn't a proper knockdown, but to the judges on the scorecards and that, officially it was a knockdown. It was scored as a knockdown. But what was quite interesting was that third round, between both guys. Even though Ortiz got knocked down twice, he came out in that third round looking the fresher of the two. Do you know what I mean? That second round took it out of Ruiz. He was kind of gasping. You could see his mouth. He was open. He's gasping for air. Do you know what I mean? So it really affected him. That second round, and allowed Ortiz to come back into the fight. Doing really well up until the 7th round. It was the 7th round again where he was in close with Ruiz, and again he got caught. Do you know what I mean? Suffered another count by the referee, but got up and boxed on, and you know what I mean, the remainder of the fight, you know what I mean, was again a close contest. Do you know what I mean? Both guys landing some good shots on each other. Do you know what I mean? For the remainder of the fight, you know what I mean, Ortiz, you know what I mean, landed some big shots on Ruiz and hurt him at times, but he just didn't have that that you know what I mean, enough power to kind of, you know what I mean, stop Ruiz in his tracks and maybe get a knockdown for himself. Whereas, as I said earlier, you know what I mean, if a younger Ortiz potentially would have had that little bit of extra power, maybe that little bit more durability on the chin, and probably wouldn't have went down, or maybe would have got a knockdown himself. Now, for me, you know what I mean, some pros and cons, you know what I mean, for both boxers in the ring. Do you know what I mean? I thought, you know what I mean, that Ortiz, you know what I mean, to start with Ortiz, I thought that he used his distance well at times. Do you know what I mean? Keeping Ruiz at bay, at distance, you know what I mean? You know what I mean? Just to avoid getting caught with that big shot. I also felt that he had the higher work rate in the ring between both, obviously between both guys, and he also had a better jab. Do you know what I mean? And his boxing selection of punches was a lot better than Ruiz. You know what I mean? He was trying to put combinations together at times, even though he was, you know what I mean, keeping him at bay and predominantly sticking out that little poking jab sort of thing. You know what I mean? But yeah, some good pros there for Ortiz. Do you know what I mean? What he didn't do well though, you know what I mean, that, you know what I mean, he didn't have enough power to hurt Ruiz. Do you know what I mean? Which was the a big indicator in the fight. And I also felt that, you know what I mean, his chin durability, which I spoke about earlier, was a major factor as well. A younger Ruiz potentially would have took that shot, maybe not have went down, but he is 43 years old, so there's only so long you could kind of box for, you know what I mean? But Ruiz, on the other hand, you know what I mean, some of his pros and cons, you know what I mean, obviously the bigger punches and bigger shots were always coming from him in the fight, you know what I mean, and he hurt Ortiz on quite a few occasions, you know what I mean, obviously noticeable in the second and seventh, but also in the latter rounds, I'd probably say latter two rounds, you know what I mean, he was landing some big shots on him as well, but you know what I mean, he just for me just didn't do enough to get an old Ortiz out there, and he should have stopped him. Do you know what I mean? And again, maybe, you know what I mean, these big power shots were kind of putting Ortiz on edge. Maybe you know what I mean, Ortiz probably wasn't going looking for the knockout himself because he thought, you know, if I try and mix it again with Ruiz, I'm going to get put down again. So who knows really, but you know what I mean, some of his cons, you know what I mean, Ruiz's cons, I felt that his work rate was very poor. Do you know what I mean? For a guy that's been posting a lot of stuff on social media about how fit he is, etc., it was very, very poor. He looked tired in the earlier rounds, as I said earlier, after that second round, drumming, you know what I mean, where he put Ortiz down, he just looked tired in the third. And, you know what I mean, one thing, what I was very disappointed at was his lack of punch combinations. You know what I mean, Ortiz, no, sorry, Ruiz, you know what I mean, has always been known for, you know what I mean, being able to put a lot of punches together, you know what I mean, and looking half decent at times. It's just his fitness that lets him down, so I was quite, you know what I mean, disappointed with that, really. And this is what allowed Ortiz to come back into the fight. And as I said, he should have stopped Ortiz. But anyway, I don't want to long this video out too much, you know what I mean, but, you know what I mean, where do both men go now? Do you know what I mean? Like, Ortiz, for me, you know what I mean, there's a few decent fights out there still for him. Do you know what I mean? So he's got that option, but you know what I mean. He's getting older now. You know what I mean, and he's lost to a contender who's potentially going to go forward and fight the winner of Helenius and Wilder for hopefully the title, maybe against a shot against Fury. So Ortiz might just hang up the gloves there. You know what I mean? But like I said, there's some good fights still out there for him. But Ruiz, on the other hand, you know what I mean, he's got to wait now for, a month before the Helenius and Wilder fight. And even then, you know what I mean, you know what I mean, Wilder or Helenius might not even fight till early next year. So I could potentially see him maybe trying to take, you know what I mean, an interim fight. You know what I mean? I'm not sure who against, but I could see him maybe taking an interim fight before the year's out, just to kind of keep, you know what I mean, the max sharpness and maybe try and build upon his fitness and more confidence, etc. as well. But anyway, you guys let me know in the comments below, how did you think this fight went? Do you know what I mean? Do you know what I mean, think Andy Ruiz was the deserved victor in this fight? Do you know what I mean? Do you feel as if he should have probably put a bit more pressure on and maybe stopped Ortiz? You know what I mean? Considering he is an old fighter. Do you know what I mean? But anyway, let me know in the comments below. Bless.